I need to tell you what happened to me at St. Dymphna's, because I don't think I'm alone anymore. Not since that night. Not since I heard her singing in the dark. The email arrived on a Tuesday in late October of 2022. I remember because I'd just finished my shift at the nursing home where I worked as an aide, and I was scrolling through job listings on my phone while eating leftover pasta in my car. The subject line read, "Volunteer Opportunity, Historical Documentation Project." I almost deleted it, but something about the attached photo made me stop mid-bite. It showed the front entrance of an old brick building, its windows dark and empty, ivy crawling up the walls like veins on a dying hand. The caption identified it as St. Dymphna's Hospital for the Mentally Afflicted, located about 40 miles outside of Brennan Falls, Oregon. The email explained that a historical preservation society was looking for volunteers to help photograph and catalog the interior before the building was scheduled for demolition in December. They needed people with healthcare backgrounds who wouldn't be disturbed by, well, by whatever we might find inside. I should tell you something about myself. My name is Marcus, and I've worked with dementia patients for almost 8 years. I've held hands with people as they died. I've cleaned up things that would make most people gag. I thought I was prepared for anything. I was wrong. The orientation was held on a Saturday morning in early November. There were 6 of us volunteers gathered in the parking lot of an abandoned gas station about a mile from the hospital. The society's coordinator, a woman named Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, handed out flashlights, clipboards, and floor plans that looked like they'd been photocopied from the original 1923 blueprints. She explained that St. Dymphna's had operated as a psychiatric facility from 1923 until 1971, when it was shut down following a state investigation. The details of that investigation, she said, were sealed. But there had been rumors for decades, stories about experimental treatments, about patients who checked in but never checked out, about a nurse named Sister Marguerite who had worked in the long-term care ward and who had disappeared the same week the hospital closed its doors. We entered through a side door that had been pried open by the preservation team the week before. The smell hit me first, that particular mixture of mold, dust, and something else, something organic and wrong, like meat left too long in a warm room. Dr. Okonkwo split us into pairs. I was assigned to work with a retired firefighter named Douglas, a big man with steady hands and a calm voice that I immediately found reassuring. Our section was the 3rd floor, the long-term care ward. The stairs groaned under our weight as we climbed. Douglas went first, his flashlight cutting through the darkness like a knife through black fabric. I followed close behind, trying not to think about the sounds I was hearing from somewhere deep within the building, creaking, settling, the kinds of noises old buildings make. That's what I told myself anyway. The 3rd floor corridor stretched out before us, lined with doors on both sides. Most of them hung open, revealing small rooms with rusted bed frames and stained mattresses. The wallpaper, once white with small blue flowers, had peeled away in long strips, exposing the plaster beneath like skin peeling from a wound. Douglas and I worked methodically, photographing each room and noting its contents on our clipboards. The work was tedious, but not frightening. Just sad. Abandoned wheelchairs, rotting books, a child's drawing pinned to one wall, so faded I could barely make out what it depicted. It looked like a woman in a long dress, standing in a doorway, watching. We were about halfway down the corridor when Douglas stopped walking. He held up one hand, a signal for silence, and tilted his head like a dog hearing a distant whistle. I froze beside him, my heart suddenly loud in my ears. "You hear that?" he whispered. I listened. At first, nothing. Just the wind pushing against the building's old bones, making the walls groan. And then, I did hear it, singing. It was faint, coming from somewhere ahead of us. A woman's voice, soft and melodic, humming a tune I didn't recognize. The melody was simple, almost childlike, like a lullaby you might sing to help someone fall asleep. or to keep them calm while something terrible happened. Douglas looked at me, and I saw something I hadn't expected to see in this man's eyes: fear, real fear. "The building's supposed to be empty," he said. "They cleared it out, checked every room." I nodded, my throat too dry to speak. The singing continued, closer now. Or maybe it just seemed closer because we were both straining to hear it, our senses sharpened by adrenaline. Douglas made a decision. He squared his shoulders and started walking toward the sound, his flashlight beam steady despite the slight tremor I noticed in his hands. I followed because I didn't know what else to do. Because going back down those dark stairs alone seemed somehow worse than moving forward together. The corridor ended at a set of double doors. The paint had once been white but had yellowed with age, and someone had scratched words into the surface at eye level. I leaned closer, trying to read them in the dim light. "She sings them to sleep. She keeps them forever." Douglas pushed the doors open. The room beyond was larger than the others, some kind of common area maybe, with high ceilings and tall windows that let in just enough moonlight to see by. There were chairs arranged in a circle in the center of the room, as if for group therapy. Dust covered everything like a layer of gray snow. The singing had stopped, but standing in the corner, standing perfectly still in the corner where the shadows gathered thick as water, was a figure. A woman. She wore a nurse's uniform, the old-fashioned kind, with the long skirt and the white cap. Her face was turned away from us, toward the wall. Her hands hung at her sides, fingers slightly curled. She wasn't moving, wasn't breathing as far as I could tell, just standing there, like a mannequin, like something arranged and left behind. "Hello?" Douglas called out, his voice cracking on the word. "Ma'am, are you okay?" She turned around. I don't know how to describe what I saw. Her face was wrong, that's the only way I can put it. The features were all in the right places, but they didn't move the way a living person's features should move. Her smile was too wide, her eyes were too still. And when she opened her mouth to speak, the voice that came out wasn't the singing voice we'd heard in the corridor. It was my grandmother's voice. "Marcus," she said, using my grandmother's exact intonation, the way she used to say my name when I was a child, and had done something that worried her. "Marcus, you shouldn't be here. You should be resting. Let me help you rest." Douglas grabbed my arm and pulled. We ran. I don't remember the corridor or the stairs or the side door banging open as we burst into the cold November night. I just remember running, my lungs burning, until we reached the parking lot and collapsed against Douglas's truck, both of us gasping for air. When I looked back at the building, I saw her, standing in a third-floor window, watching us. Dr. Okonkwo shut down the project the next day. She said there had been structural concerns. She said the building wasn't safe. But I saw her face when Douglas and I told her what happened. I saw the way her hands trembled when she collected our clipboards and cameras. She knew something. She knew what lived in that building. I went home and tried to forget. Tried to convince myself that it had been a hallucination, a trick of light and shadow and stress. I almost succeeded. Until 3 weeks later, when I woke up at 3:15 in the morning to the sound of singing. It was coming from inside my closet. The same lullaby, the same soft melodic humming. And underneath it, I could hear my grandmother's voice, calling my name, telling me to rest, telling me she would keep me forever. I moved out of that apartment the next day. I'm staying with my sister now, 400 miles away. I thought distance would help, but last night, I heard it again. Faint, distant, but getting closer. I don't know what Sister Marguerite wants. I don't know why she chose me. But I'm starting to understand something about that hospital, about what happened there in the years before it closed. She wasn't just a nurse, she was a collector. And I think she's still collecting. They told me the job would be easy. Security guard at an abandoned hospital. Just walk the perimeter, check the locks, report anything unusual. What they didn't tell me was that something in Building C had been waiting for someone new, someone who would listen. My name is Danielle Reyes, and for 3 months in 2019, I worked the night shift at the Waverly Mills Medical Complex in rural Kentucky. The complex had been closed for renovations since 2016, and the security company I worked for had been contracted to keep vagrants and urban explorers out until construction resumed. The complex consisted of 4 buildings connected by covered walkways. Buildings A, B, and D were standard hospital structures, patient rooms, surgical suites, administrative offices. Building C was different. Building C had been the psychiatric wing. My supervisor, a man named Carl, who always smelled like cigarettes and cheap cologne, gave me a tour on my first night. He walked me through the main entrance, showed me the security desk where I'd spend most of my time, and handed me a ring of keys that must have weighed 2 pounds. "You'll do rounds every 2 hours," he explained, his voice echoing in the empty lobby. "Check all the exterior doors, make sure nothing's been tampered with. Takes about 45 minutes if you don't rush it." I nodded, taking notes on the little pad I'd brought. "One more thing." Carl stopped walking and turned to face me. His expression, which had been bored and professional until that moment, shifted into something harder to read. "You'll notice Building C isn't on the round schedule." I looked down at the map he'd given me. He was right. Buildings A, B, and D were marked with numbered checkpoints. Building C was just blank, a gray rectangle with no markings. "Why not?" I asked. Carl was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. "Careful. The connecting walkway was damaged in a storm last year, structurally unsound. Company decided it wasn't worth the liability, so we just leave it alone." He held my gaze for a second longer than necessary. "Leave it alone, Danielle. Whatever you hear, whatever you think you see in the windows, leave it alone." The first few weeks were uneventful. I'd arrive at 11 in the evening, relieve the day shift guard, a quiet woman named Patricia who never said more than 3 words to me, and settle in at the security desk with my thermos of coffee and a paperback novel. The rounds were tedious, but not unpleasant. I'd walk the empty corridors with my flashlight, checking doors and windows, listening to the buildings settle around me. Old hospitals make a lot of noise at night, pipes groaning, elevators humming even though they'd been shut off for years, sounds that could make you jumpy if you let them. I didn't let them. I'd grown up in a rough neighborhood, and I'd learned early that fear was a luxury I couldn't afford. But Building C was different. I first noticed it during my second week. I was doing my midnight round through Building B, walking past the old radiology department, when I happened to glance out a window that overlooked the courtyard between buildings. Building C was dark. Of course it was dark. The power had been cut years ago, but as I watched, I saw something move in one of the third-floor windows, just a shadow, a shape passing behind the glass. I told myself it was a reflection, my own flashlight beam bouncing off multiple surfaces. I almost believed it. The next night, I saw it again. Same window, same shadow, but this time, it stopped moving. It stood there, perfectly still, as if it knew I was watching, as if it was watching me back. I mentioned it to Carl when he came by to check in the following week. His reaction was strange. He didn't seem surprised or skeptical. He just nodded slowly, like I'd confirmed something he already suspected. "I told you to leave Building C alone," he said. "That means not looking at it too, not if you can help it." "What's in there, Carl?" He didn't answer. He just gathered up his paperwork and left, pausing at the door to look back at me with something like pity in his eyes. "The last 3 guards we had on night shift all quit within a month," he said. "They all saw things too, things that didn't make sense. If you're smart, you'll do your rounds, keep your eyes on the floor, and pretend Building C doesn't exist." He was gone before I could respond. I should have listened to him. I should have taken the job seriously and collected my paycheck and never thought about that dark building with its empty windows and its impossible shadows. But I've never been good at leaving things alone. On my 23rd night at Waverly Mills, I decided to investigate. The connecting walkway to Building C was indeed damaged. Part of the ceiling had collapsed and there was caution tape across the entrance. But the walkway itself was passable if you were careful. I'd checked it with my flashlight. The floor was solid. The damage was cosmetic. Carl had lied to me. I waited until 2 in the morning, when the world outside was at its quietest. Then I ducked under the caution tape and started walking. The walkway was about 50 feet long, enclosed by glass walls that let in just enough moonlight to see by. My footsteps echoed strangely, the sound bouncing off surfaces in ways that didn't quite make sense. By the time I reached the door to Building C, my heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. The door was unlocked. That should have been my first warning. A building that had supposedly been sealed for years, and the door just opened. I stepped inside. The smell hit me immediately. Antiseptic and something else, something sweeter. Like flowers left too long in a vase. The corridor stretched out before me, lined with doors that had been painted a cheerful yellow at some point but had faded to the color of old teeth. I walked slowly, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The rooms I passed were empty, stripped of furniture and equipment, but on the walls, someone had written things. Numbers, mostly. Dates, patient identification codes, maybe. But mixed in with the numbers were words, names. Eleanor March, 17 years. Thomas Gill, 42 years. Sister Marguerite, forever. That name. I'd seen it before, in an article I'd read about the history of psychiatric care in Kentucky. Sister Marguerite had been a nurse at a facility in Oregon that closed in the 70s. There had been rumors about her, dark rumors. But she disappeared before any investigation could be launched. What was her name doing on a wall in Kentucky? I kept walking. The corridor ended at a stairwell, and something, curiosity, stubbornness, or something else entirely, pushed me to climb. The third floor was different from the others. The doors here were heavier, reinforced with metal plates. The windows in each door were small and covered with wire mesh. This had been the secure ward, the place where they put the patients who couldn't be trusted around others, the place where things had gone wrong. I found the room at the end of the hall. It was larger than the others, with a window overlooking the courtyard, the same window where I'd seen the shadow, and inside the room, I found her. Not a body, not a ghost, something in between. She was sitting in a chair facing the window, her back to me. She wore a nurse's uniform, the old-fashioned kind. Her hair was gray, pinned up beneath a white cap. She wasn't moving. "Hello?" My voice came out as a whisper. "Ma'am?" She turned. Her face was kind, grandmotherly almost. But her eyes were wrong. They didn't reflect my flashlight. They seemed to absorb the light instead, pulling it in and giving nothing back. "You're the new one," she said. Her voice was soft, gentle, the voice of someone used to soothing frightened patients. "You're the one who wouldn't stop looking." I couldn't move, couldn't run. My body had locked up, every muscle frozen. "That's all right," she continued, rising from her chair, with a grace that seemed impossible for someone who looked so old. "They never stop looking. That's how I find them. That's how I keep them." She started humming. A lullaby. Simple and melodic and utterly terrifying. I don't remember leaving the building. I don't remember the walkway or the security desk or the parking lot. I just remember sitting in my car as the sun came up, my hands shaking so badly I couldn't fit the key in the ignition. I never went back to Waverly Mills. I called Carl the next day and quit over the phone. He didn't ask why. He just sighed, like he'd been expecting it. "You saw her, didn't you?" he said. It wasn't a question. "Who is she?" I demanded. "What is she?" Carl was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was tired, resigned. "She used to work at a hospital in Oregon, St. Dimphna's, back in the 50s and 60s. They say she developed attachments to certain patients, couldn't let them go, even after they died." "That's impossible. That would make her old," Carl interrupted. "Very old. And yet people keep seeing her in Oregon, in Kentucky, in 3 other states I know of. Wherever there's an abandoned hospital, wherever the forgotten and the broken once lived. She shows up eventually." "What does she want?" Carl's answer still haunts me. "She wants to help them rest, forever. And if you've seen her, If she's noticed you, she won't stop. Not until you're hers. I moved across the country after that, changed my name, tried to start over. But last week I drove past an old shuttered hospital on the outskirts of town. Just drove past it, didn't even slow down. And in my rearview mirror, I saw a figure standing in one of the upper windows. A woman in a nurse's uniform. Watching. I'm writing this down because I need someone to know. I need someone to understand what's out there. Sister Marguerite isn't just a ghost or a story. She's something else, something that feeds on the lonely and the forgotten, something that never stops collecting. And I think I'm next on her list. If you ever find yourself near an abandoned hospital, especially at night, take my advice. Don't look at the windows, don't listen for the singing, and whatever you do, don't go inside Building C. Some nurses never stop making their rounds, even after death takes away their patients and gives them something else to care for instead.